I'm Steph Strickland with GeekWire Studios here at AWS reInvent 2025. I want to introduce you to my guests right now. This is a fascinating topic. We're talking about Merck and AI and Accenture and how this all comes together. So let me introduce you first to Sean Finnerty, the AVP Digital Platforms and Services at Merck, as well as Chris Wegmann, the CTO of Accenture AWS Business Group. Gentlemen, thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Now these two know each other, so we're in for quite a treat once we spin them up and get them going. For those of you who have paid attention in the medical space, AI obviously accelerating the pace of so many things when it comes to drug discovery, as well as accelerating clinical trials in some really unique and novel ways. But I want to approach this conversation from the technical side. Tell me from your vantage point, what's some of the infrastructure that's required to help Merck be successful in this space?
Yeah, I mean, it's building on a lot of the fundamentals that we've been working on since we started the cloud journey years ago. The idea of commoditizing infrastructure so that you can quickly create fit-for-purpose environments to serve workloads is core to the strategy. AI is just a very particular type and class of workload that requires differentiated infrastructure. What we've seen though is our ability to just create infrastructure on demand for any number of different workload types has enabled us to move very, very quickly with AI. So as the requirements come in, we're already tooled and ready to go to deploy whatever we need in order to do the work. So the bigger challenge for us has been less about the plumbing and the infrastructure and more about there's so much optionality right now. It's early in the game, so to speak, for AI. A lot of investment going on, rate of change is very, very high. It's really more about which bets are we going to place, what are we going to pick to go a little deeper on and make some investments and spend some time on, versus what are we going to just sit back and wait and see. So it's a constantly evolving space.
You're 100% right. You and I have interviewed together before and we weren't even discussing this, and here we are now with this. I mean, the speed at which it accelerates is remarkable. I'm curious about your perspective, Chris, on this, as someone who not only partners with Merck and here with Sean, but also from a broader perspective. What are your thoughts on this?
I think he's 100% right. To build that foundation, we talk a lot about building the foundation, the automation, and that stuff, and a lot of our customers have invested in that journey. I would say Merck's done an amazing job investing in that journey, but it set the foundation for AI. And to your point, right, 2-3 years ago when we started this program, we were talking high performance compute, we were talking cloud, we were talking software as a service.
AI didn't even come up.
No, it wasn't even a concept. And even though our life sciences customers like Merck were using GPUs, right, to do high performance compute and things like that, and it was one of the archetypes we were working through. But again, we never talked about it. But because we had spent so much time on the automation and the DevSecOps around it, the data layers, and really focusing on an AWS first, public cloud first approach, it set the stage. And when this started emerging a couple years ago, I remember talking about it,
yeah.
And we're like, we are so glad that we did it and invested the time and put the diligence into building the automation, or we would not have been able to move that fast.
So let's talk a little bit about investments, and this is where we're talking about this sort of digital landscape and really making sure that what you are investing in creates that measurable business value on the back end. How does this partnership work to help you guys get there?
Yeah, I think maybe just briefly on some of the fundamentals, Chris alluded to the investments we made in just blocking and tackling from an infrastructure deployment, operations management. Those investments have paid dividends. There's another layer now that we're contemplating with respect to investments we talk a lot about, and that is your data layer has to be solid and your engineering discipline has to be solid. If you don't make those two investments to make sure your data is clean and organized and your engineers are building things in a predictable, consistent way, it's like Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Like they built a castle in the swamp, the castle fell over, they built another castle, it fell over, and then they built a third castle, that one stayed up. We're trying to avoid the first two castles falling over by making sure that the foundation that we build this on is rock solid. Because when I talk to other of my peers, other customers, other companies, many of them are struggling with some of the basics with respect to accessibility and availability of their data, and engineering discipline, consistent ways of building things, because AI will do very, very well if you ask it to do the same thing repeatedly, built on a knowledge base that's curated and fit for purpose. If you throw it 100 million different options on how to build something, it's going to struggle to get you, where you need to be. So like I'm really hyper-focused on getting the basics right at those two foundational layers, and then I feel the next round of acceleration is going to happen on the back of that.
Merck is in a position where it cannot fail. Everyone pays a lot of attention. There's a lot of regulation around how medicine is consumed and developed. From your perspective, as someone who then works with a lot of different business partners, what advantage do you bring to a company like Merck where it has to be right the first time? You don't have the option to build three castles.
Well, to your point, we focus on the foundation, we focus on the fundamentals. I could not agree more about the strong engineering principles and practices. I think, customers, cloud's evolved a lot. We've talked multiple times about cloud migration and modernization and things like that. If you just focused on that, like you didn't have to put the discipline in place to be able to do the principles and things like that. So, that's one thing when we focus around all types of clients, whether they're regulated or unregulated, is building that discipline, is building that foundation that's secure and scalable and putting in the automation. It sounds like basic blocking and tackling, but I've seen a lot of customers who may skip that step in the sense of urgency to either exit a data center or something like that. The customers that have done that are now coming back and resetting that foundation to be able to support AI and the data layers that you're talking about.
My final question to you before we wrap up. What is the most rewarding part of this particular partnership? I know that you're friends, but realistically this ability to come together, bring your knowledge base and the structure of what it is that you're doing really sort of makes a little bit of magic happen. What's the most rewarding part?
It's an easy answer for me. I'm a big idea guy, right? The thing I value the most is calling up Wegmann and being like, hey, am I out of my mind, or are we actually going to be able to pull this off?
And what do you say?
I say absolutely. But I really appreciate the willingness to change and the willingness to push the envelope and take those crazy ideas and the passion that Sean and his team have had about making this real is unlike any other. And it takes that passion because this stuff is not easy. Right, we're unwinding years and years of, of architecture, years and years of development and things like that. Obviously, working in the regulated, you can't get it wrong, right? So it takes a lot of hard problems to work through, and someone that doesn't get frustrated is willing to keep going.
Yeah, I think another thing I really appreciate is people are wired differently. Like we get along great because our personalities are similar. We speak the same language. Not everybody's like that. And I love the ability to reach into the firm, and if I have an analytical-minded person who wants to respond to an approach that's validated with data, or they want to talk about very specific things, it's just a phone call away. Like, hey, I need somebody who can get in a room with this person and explain, like, behind the curtain, 17 levels deep, how does this stuff work? Go bring the right guy. Or if it's, hey, I need somebody who can just paint the broad strokes picture, bring the right person to the conversation. So meeting people where they're at, pulling the right talent at the right time to have the right conversation, to move the needle even just one more inch forward, and then it's a two-way street. We'll do the same. We'll talk internally and figure out what's the best strategy to just advance the whole program, whether it's directly in our control or something we're working on adjacently. Yeah, it's a great partnership.
And I wouldn't be remiss without saying, obviously working with Merck and the impact they have on people, right? Every day it excites you to work with them and what the impact they're having on people and people's health. It's, there's no better reward.
It's fun to wake up in the morning and work on that problem.
Very well put, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Great seeing you again.
I'm Steph Strickland. You're watching GeekWire Studios.